So our afternoon, we have Stephen Falk from Switchback to talk about building strong teams. And as you can see, he's a very electrifying presenter, and he's going to be going all over the map with this sort of thing. So without further ado, Stephen Falk.
Hey, it's a real privilege to be here again. I think last time I was at this conference, I was in one of the workshop rooms, and we had like 2 sessions. We just packed it out. It was really awesome. Switchback is yours. And so Switchback we're international now. We're in a couple different countries. We're doing some really significant work, but this is your DNA. So our roadshow is your roadshow. Do you want to remember how it started? I'll tell you the story. I was coaching some minor hockey, and John Bulcock and Mark Kenny had their rotten teenage boys that should have been rep players, but problems with attitude. They didn't quite make the team. And so they came onto my house hockey team. And how do you think those boys were, like, first day when they got demoted, didn't make the cut, and they're on my team? I'm thinking, boy, they can skate backwards, and they got a slap shot, score. They're like, this sucks. I'm too good for this. And so John and Mark sitting there with their Western Forest jackets on the top of the stands, they watched their boys go from being pretty just boys to becoming team members. And it happened. And we ended up winning the championship at the end of the year, which is house hockey, so whatever, right? However, it was a ragtag team. And then in 2005, somebody did something stupid in Gold River. And they're scratching their heads going, who could possibly help us with that? Because that's not even in the rule book. We don't even know what to do with that behavior. And then John goes, oh, remember Falk, that guy that coached our kids? Let's give him a go. So that was what's called the red phone. The red phone got picked up. I picked up my red phone, and it was just totally random. Said, hey, Steve, remember us? Not really. Can you come give us a hand in Gold River? So that was the beginning of Switchback. Did a bit of consulting within Western Forest, and then in 2009, they had another incident with a faller. And this time, John Bulcock invited me in again and said, hey, we're just going to tell you everything we know about this incident, all what's taking place. And we actually tell this story around the world now. It's so cool about the faller and his undercut and his saw getting pinched, and how he switched from the front of his brain to the back of the brain and had like 14 decisions that weren't part of his rational sort of game plan, but they took over his mind. Seeing my face on there is really distracting. It's like, I'm trying not to look, but it's like, squirrel, squirrel. So if I do this one, I'm trying to show you guys love, but I might have to avoid you until my brain normalizes the screen. So love you guys over here. You guys are a great group, but over here, not so good. So at that meeting, I drew like on a napkin, essentially, the first drawings of Switchback. And I was a family therapist at the time and doing some consulting in business. And the room exploded, and they said, wow, that was really interesting. But here's the point. I walked out of that meeting, like you walk out of lots of different situations in your life. I just walked out to continue my normal life. I really did. But one person had self and situational awareness. One person. And one person stopped, and he thought for a second and said, holy, is this something? And then he opened up his mouth and he said, Falk. So I stopped halfway down the hallway, because I'm a very obedient person, grew up in a very traditional, I think this whole millennial thing, my entire family is traditional, just to let you know. So I might look like a baby boomer, barely, but believe me, there's a lot of tradition in here. So I just stopped, because it was John Bulcock. So John said, Falk, you don't know what just happened there, do you? No. So then he pins me against the wall, like shoulders against the wall, which is not bullying in the workplace. It's called, I'm not sure what it's called. Love. It's called love. See, because if you're attention deficit, you need a little bit more physical contact in order to create focus. So when my wife really wants to get my attention, she actually grabs my big fat head and goes, okay, Steve, focus. Right now, I'm with you. But I'm looking, I'm not, yeah, okay, I'm still focused. So John said this, he said, hey, you don't know what happened in there, do you? You just described something we've been looking for, and your life as you know it is over. You're going to go home and tell your wife you're now a consultant that's building something, and we don't even know what it is, and it's going to save lives. And it's going to be incubated in Western Forest Products, and once it's mature enough to be given to the rest of the world, it's going to go to the world. And surprise, surprise, we travel now to Australia, New Zealand, Mongolia, tons of the United States, and here it is. One person. And so as safety officers and safety people and committed to it, you got to start thinking about team, like the advancement of safety within your zone of influence is you got to stop and pay attention to those moments. They say statistically you have about 12 hours to take action on a new idea before it dies. So if you have a new idea and you just so, oh, that was interesting, but you don't take some sort of action. So if you think about it, John did it. He stopped. He goes, what is this? This might be something, it might not be something. And then he thought about it. Then he took immediate action. He said, Falk, stop. He gave me the stern, recommissioning of my entire life. Thank you very much. Now I'm perpetually on jet lag. It's lovely. And then he said, we'll build team. You got to support it. If there's innovation around building like a mental health program, you've got to support it. So we're honestly not bragging, but we were just in Australia like 3 weeks ago or 2 weeks ago, and we're working with an entire room of millennials, except for one old dog that was there too. And they have a new CEO, this is with Vic Forrest, and the new CEO says, okay, a new word for my tenure is going to be innovation. So we just say, right on. So it's really easy, you just write innovation on the top of a sheet of paper, and you put it on the wall and say, okay, so next 3 days, we're just going to be talking and all kinds of stuff. We're going to be hunting like dogs for innovation. So here's one of their innovations that they came up with. How about we have a peer support program that actually is for our peers? Because the company's current peer support program, guess who's on the committee? Remember with the generation thing? All baby boomers. And so who do they like to have one-on-ones with? Each other. So the millennials said, here's an innovation. Why don't we actually create a peer support program run by, administered to, and serving millennials? Not trying to create division, they're just trying to create an open conversation. Now that's like a John Bullock moment, isn't it? So you can either stop, take notice, do something about it, talk about it, and create some sort of an action to get it rolling, or it just dies in the vine. So the action was, I had a Skype interview with the CEO the next week back in Canada, and we went over 17 innovations, and he was really interested. That, ladies and gentlemen, is how change happens. It always involves a person. And I can't think of 400 better people than yourselves right here in this room. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a bit of a crash course on sort of where Switchback is today right now, so that we have a working language. Then I'm going to ask you to do some work. So here's the work. I'm going to ask you to stop. Just stop. And I'm going to ask you to think. It's called metacognition, thinking about your thoughts. Think about all the thoughts you had coming into this conference. Think about the thoughts that you've been having with these really awesome presenters. Like stop and think. And then I ask you to talk. I know this is crazy threatening, but just like talk to someone beside you and say, here's some of my ideas that I've just been kicking around over the last 6 months. Here's a couple of the ideas I've been kicking around just since lunchtime, since Mr. BX talked. Man, that was crazy. So just talk, swap a couple stories, and then come up with an option for action. That's all I'm asking for. So, crash course. Let's start with stop. In order to stop, you actually have to have a couple core beliefs. The first core belief is you have to switch into modern science, which is you have to believe in neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity says that people can change. That's one of our core values in Switchback, is that we say people can change. That's why personality profiling is kind of an ancient thought process. because that says, hey, this is my personality, that's my profile, that's where I'm going to be living. However, that's not necessarily accurate because neuroplasticity tells you can change. It was actually in a courthouse in Nanaimo, back when I was being a family therapist. I was expert witness at this horrible case. And so the judge asked me straight up, she said, Mr. Falk, do you believe that people can change their personalities? I thought, oh, this sounds like a trick question. Because it's always a power struggle in court, right? They're trying to make other people look stupid and all the rest. So her goal was to try to make me look stupid. So I waited a second. What did I do? I stopped, and then I thought, and then I talked my plan. By the way, this wasn't natural for me. I was just talk. Some of you don't talk at all. Some of you never stop. Some of you stop and never start. Some of you never make plans. So we all have strengths and weaknesses on this little four-point piece, but I was just a talker. So typically, my old model would be, the judge would say, hey, can people change their personality? I go, well, that's really good. Dig with a hole, shoot the dog. So my answer to her was this, I think, Your Honor, I think people have their personality, but they can be either functional or dysfunctional within their personality. Or to use switchback terms, they can either be in team with their personality or can they be out of team. You're like Myers-Briggs, right? They say, oh, like I'm an I, which means I'm introverted, which means after every meeting I need to do deep breathing in the bathroom by myself in the cubicle for 45 minutes, and then I'm good. You know, that's a possibility. Or I'm an extrovert, that means I get to interrupt anyone all the time with my brilliant ideas, blah, 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 you know, I'm this and that. And so you have to, the primary question isn't if you're an introvert or if you're an extrovert. The primary question is, are you in team? Are you in team with the way that you're acting? Are you in team with the way that you're thinking? So the stop piece is very simple. In your brain, you've got a steady stream of stimulus coming your way. And then you have, oh boy, that's a bit annoying, isn't it? Ha! Anybody getting shivers? Ha! Let's try this one. See if it sounds better. See, that's called stop, think, talk it out loud. I just demonstrated, didn't I? And come up with a new plan. If I had just left it on here, that would probably, some of you would be like, now I'm irritated. And now I'm getting a little bit ticked off, and now I'm checking out. And rather than being in team, you're out of team. See how quickly it happens? You're in team, all of a sudden like squeak, squeak, squeak. How was Stephen Falk the presenter? Squeaky. Did he say anything? I can't remember. All I remember was squeaky. Let's give it a go. So here's stimulus response. There's a part of your brain that does not, that can't respond with what we call a gap. And so it can't stop. Look at that. Oh, it's still a bit bad. Then there's another part of your brain. I'll smush the top. That's better. Another part of your brain that can actually form this, which we call the gap. If you start believing that that's a possibility in your life, at home, at work, and in the community, you can actually develop neurological capacity to stop at any moment and rethink your next move. It can change a lot of your dating history. Dead serious. Even just from a positive point of view. Last night, Karen and I were on a bit of a rib fest, just for fun. You go into themes, right? So the theme is ribs right now, so we're at the Browns. Never been to Browns. It was packed. We drove by it and went, that place is packed. We turned around on the freeway and came back and went in there. And then we spied out the corner spot outside that looked like the quietest because they went, ooh, this is super loud. And they actually gave us that spot. So here it is. Karen orders a half a rack of ribs. For $8, you can supersize it to full rack. That's good value, isn't it? Normally, you don't stop, think, talk, and act. This is very practical stuff. I just looked at it and said, well, I'm doing calamari, so maybe I want to do your ribs too. So I stopped. The stimulus is, great food tonight. My old response would have just powered through and ordered my own meal. My new response was team, and I bought half a rack for $8. That could have sounded wrong. Excuse me very much. Pardon me? By the full rack, that's right. So when we draw this out, we draw it out like this. We just say basically there's a target in life that is, this is mental health, this is team, this is capacity, this is where you want to live. And mental health. And when we draw the switchback diagram, those that haven't seen it before, we actually divide the brain into two categories. We say the front of the brain is where all the good stuff happens. That's where you're smart and you're mature and you're in team and you do what you actually want to do. Then the back of the brain is the part of the brain that is what engages in what's called the flight-fight response. And switchback, if you think about it being a switchback going up a mountain, when you get in the upset condition, you leave the front of your brain momentarily driven by adrenaline, and you go to the flight, to the fight, to the fight, to the fight. And depending on what the situation is and how it happens, if you're attention deficit, you just live here in the fight response. If you have anxiety, you live here. If you suffer with depressive thoughts, you live in this zone. If you have anger outbursts, you live here, but you shoot out to here. And so you can describe just about any mental health condition kind of on this chart in a very simplistic way, which is not minimizing it, it's actually making it somewhat profound because you can grab hold of it and look at it and you can say, oh, I get it. So the number one is stop. Some of you are just really good at it already. Some would be really good to practice. Now, how do you know that you've stopped? Because you can actually, first step is you stop mid-sentence. So you go, that looks, and then you stop right there, you go, I'm just not going to finish that sentence. Do you know that not finishing sentences is a very wise thing to do? And someone says, well, finish your sentence. You go, I prefer not. You say, why? The wrong part of my brain was talking right now. Simple, truthful answer. And it's not representing the core of who I am or what I'm trying to achieve in life. And they go, fair enough. So what did you want to say? Oh, now you activate it. Stop, think about it, and then talk it through and come up with new action. After you start stopping halfway through sentences, you can actually start stopping before the sentence even comes out of your mouth. So you're about to, and you go, and use visual clues to help yourself. I know this sounds really odd, but you need a little bit of help. So if it's Friday night and you're trying to sort out which fight you want to have with your spouse tonight, and you can't decide, there's so many topics. So you just got to get you can rub your chin, you can put your hand up, because hand up sort of like, just hold on a second. Just wait, I'm just thinking. I know last weekend we scrapped about the kids. The weekend before was money. We haven't scrapped about sex for a long time. Should we cycle that one through? So it's really a powerful way to just stop and pick your fight rather than it's boring if you just do the same one every weekend. Because now we're together, now we got to be team. So the way that we get team going is we have a big fight, and that way we can ruin our weekend and I can cut firewood. Boom. Nailed it again. So once you've got it to the point where you can stop there, then what you're doing is you're actually neurologically training your pathways, the pathways in your brain. And you're creating what's called now a new preferred pathway. The preferred pathway is now starting to operate into this part of the brain. So now you're getting the same stimulus you got before, which is a challenging worker, work safe showing up, the police pulling you over, your kid telling you that you suck. You name it, whatever the stimulus, you're now developing what's called mental health capacity to manage what Al was talking about, the number one problem, which is stress. You're learning how to manage stress. Eventually, it'll become habitual. And then you can start passing it on to your coworkers, you can start passing it on to your family members, and you can just say, we're a family, we're a company that has a culture that manages stress. There's lots of words for it, but I really like the words of Robert Greene. He's now the CEO of one of the big plantations in New Zealand, but this was his mandate running in the company. He said, we will always be the most reasonable person in the room. How is that for a company to work for? We will always be the most reasonable person in the room. So we'll have environmentalists yelling at us, telling us lies. We'll have government changing their minds. We'll have contractors saying that our rates are unfair. We'll have all kinds of tension in the room at any given time. Our goal as a company, from the junior forester to the VP to myself, is we're going to be the reasonable person in the room. Does that sound a good life or not a good life? Sound like a reasonable target? In order to achieve that target, they had to learn how to stop. Because to become reasonable, you actually have to learn how to accept, see the stress, and then learn how to manage it. Okay. Think. Wait a second, you saw this already, didn't you? So I'm getting hooked up with the wires in the back, and just chatting it up. I drop my, there it is. And just right beside there is a guy that says, hey, Steve, I don't recognize him. But, you know, there's a lot of you, and we sort of travel the world. So I say, what's your name? He goes, Bob. I go, where do I know you from? Because that's a fair question, isn't it? Because that's actually stopping, rather than, hey, Steve, hey. Is that stopping? No, that's going through because you're not comfortable building team. So here's, my goal is to build teams. So I stop. He says, hey, Steve. I go, he goes, Bob. He goes, where do I know you from? Oh, from that Marine. Oh, and I go, I spoke at your drunken Christmas party, didn't I? And he goes, yes, you did. I said, oh, there's one memory I have from that. This one guy, he talked to me later on at a conference or something. He said, man, you rocked my world at home. I said, he was like the dispatch guy. And he goes, that's me. So I go, serious, that's you? Now what's happening? Are we joining team? Oh yeah, I'm sitting down, I'm like, this is really interesting. He said, boy, I gotta make sure I got my story straight because I'm telling your story all around the whole world. He goes, well, it goes like this. And I said, Al, can I tell it here? Because it's a cool story. He goes, sure. He says, man, you lost a lot of weight. He goes, yeah, 65 pounds. They go, oh, how come? He said, well, I got a little sick, and now I'm on this really cool diet, managing my insulin. I said, good for you. Me too, 16 pounds for me. So anyways, he goes, here it is. You're at our drunken Christmas party, and you're just describing the brain, and you tell us that memories are stored all over the brain, but the two primary places are the front of the brain, which is memories are stored, like creates tremendous capacity for resilience and managing stress, and then the stuff in your life that your front of the brain is not interested in storing or cannot store gets stored in here, and these are called memory vaults, and we just call them memory X's. So he says, this was the routine I had. It's just an innocent, but it's a cool story. The routine is this. Saturday morning is the beginning of the weekend. So good old Bob gets up and makes a nice warm breakfast for his wife. And then he says, honey, breakfast time. And she doesn't respond. So he goes, honey, breakfast time. Still no response. Your damn breakfast is ready. Do you see what's happening? So his brain is going from honey breakfast to no response, actually creates stress. Stress pushes him out of team, and he starts losing the gap. The gap is, you know, I'm looking forward to having a great weekend. So he starts pushing him out. So either he's going out to the passive side of this continuum, or he's going out to the aggressive. So if he's going out to the passive side, it's like, whatever, I don't care. But a good old Bob, he starts heading out to the aggressive side, outside of team. So it's not like, let's go! Bitch. But just loud enough, he actually hopes that she hears just a little bit of the intuition, like just there, goes through the walls, you know, because he's trying to get a response from this, because he's got a hot breakfast. So eventually he's like, she doesn't love me, she doesn't respect me, I have no idea why I'm even living here, this is ridiculous, and then, and he loses his marbles. And there goes the weekend. So after the drunken Christmas party, he's just hanging around talking to and thinking, because he stopped and he thought about the talk, the switchback talk. He goes, I bet you what is in my memory vault? Like, I must have an X around food or around breakfast or something. And then it just came to him, because your brain is dying to tell you stories that are stored right here. It's dying to tell you these stories. So this is a story. His mom would say, boys, breakfast, or boys, dinner, and they had like 3 seconds to get to the table before the threat was, no dinner for you, into the garbage. So she had a very good training model, didn't she? Do you think they responded? Wait, did they respond with the front of their brains or the backs of their brains? Was it flight-fight response? So that's old school leadership, by the way. You create fear and intimidation, and bam, you can get some serious results. It's amazing. My dad did it with, 3-step discipline. 1, step 2, step 3, start swinging, and it's like, surprise. He grieved when they took it out of schools, because he was a very good teacher with the traditional discipline model. He didn't retire in a family as fast, because there you're the king of your own castle. So it's no judgment on Bob's mom. She was living the world that most parents, that was the toolbox for building team, is you use guilt, fear, and intimidation to try to get results. If you try doing that now, you probably go to jail. Just saying, it's kind of it's unfortunately, but the world has changed. So you have to find some other country, maybe North Korea would work for you, but. So Bob goes, I got it. I captured a memory that was stored subconsciously, unconsciously in my mind for my entire adult life that was screwing up my weekends. This goes, I understand. We say that understanding is about 80%, because the limiting belief that he had attached to that was this. Food is to be consumed immediately. If you don't respond to the food call, the bell and the dog salivating, you obviously aren't part of the team. It's not rational, is it? But it's not supposed to be rational, because it's this part of the brain. So all of us deal with this kind of thing. Oh, by the way, it's all solved. Happy marriage, happy life, they're just rolling. Their last Saturday's breakfast was, you made a hot breakfast. She slept in a bit longer. She's now informed him that she actually likes it cold. It's like earth-shattering marital intervention. Do you know that every single one of your operators has a brain stuffed full of memory X's? Isn't that just comforting? So nice to know. And so stop, think. So number 3 is talk. When we it's the funnest sidebar, right? So we did a couple conferences in Australia, and we thought, man, we're getting this thing where they're laughing, and New Zealand too. Like, we got invited to some of their safety conferences. We're nailing this thing. So when we got our first corporate client there, we zoomed down there. We get the dogs and ponies and the pom-poms rolling, and we just like roar out of the gate, because we got to capture their attention. We totally lost the room. Like, they were not loving us at all. And we're thinking, man, what is that? Like, so during the first break, we said, Paul and I were like, this isn't going so well. We're used to a better response. So I think we need to dial it down a bit. So we asked the hotel to give us like stools. We sat down on stools. We lowered our voice tone. We spoke more slowly, and we just calmed it down. And you know what happened? They came into team. So in this diagram here, we'd say we came out looking too aggressive. So aggressive, what country that they would relate to is aggressive? Starts with a U. And they feel really put out when the United States muscles them as a country. They don't like being muscled by the United States. And we came in sounding like Americans. Pretty aggressive. We were just trying to be enthusiastic. And we thought that's what it took to make it happen. But what it took for us to build team, we stopped, we thought about it, we talked about it, and then we ordered stools, and we sat down and calmed down. And you know what happened? They came into team. They came into team. And when they came into team, they were then able to start talking about all the complexities of their lives, which is the game change. So the talk piece is actually really important. And every one of us has sort of our family standard of what level we talk to, right? So our family, we stay at the weather stage level. Next family, we talk sports, but not politics. Next one, like sports, politics, a little bit of, heaven forbid, religion. And then, or we talk about this, but so far, no money, because you can't talk about money. After all, how would you do succession planning? Because that would involve talking about money. And then about other things. Way at the top of that list is mental health issues. Does that sound about right? It's not easy for families to talk about mental health issues. So Al's challenge to this room was, hey everybody, I think we should start creating an environment where we can talk about mental health issues in the workplace. Well, meanwhile, we've all been trained by mom and dad, and they trained us not to talk about, mental health issues, money, sex, politics, like they said, these are the things. If you're going to go on a successful camping trip, what do you talk about? Camping. Now, if you want to have a successful hunting trip, what do you talk about? Hunting. Now, fishing is a tricky one, because when you go on a successful fishing trip, what do you talk about? Well, fishing, and if it's your hunting partners, you can talk about hunting too. But don't mess it up too much. So it's actually a huge ask to ask culture to shift, to increase capacity of connection with each other through a communication model. This is the model that we use. We just call it the 3-lane highway. So I talked about the general weather. So weather is lane number 1. Lane number 2 is you do it all the time. It's the business of the day. And believe me, if we're in your home, because we love going to people's homes, and we just watch your family, there's a good chance that your family talks about the weather and then talks about the business of the day. And it's family business, but it's still what we call lane 2. And then there's this stuff here, the stuff that really matters. But that's kind of scary stuff, right? Well, I'm not sure I'm being paid to be, I'm a supervisor, but I'm not a psychologist. You know what I mean? Like, that's the typical thing that people say. And oh, by the way, the stuff that matters, right along the edge of that curve is where the X's are. And also, that's where the gold around innovation lives. So people aren't going to put up their hand and tell you what would be a really interesting innovation if you don't have what we call lane 3 capacity. And the way you navigate this thing is pretty simple. It's just like a freeway, is you merge into the weather, you merge into business. If you develop capacity to get into stuff that matters, you get out, and you merge out. A lot of people don't actually develop this because they actually have an X around this communication model. It goes like this. Just one day, you were blindsided by somebody that said, I want to tell you my deep, dark secret. And you go, is it about hunting? No. And then before you have a chance to stop them, they start. But they don't stop. They go on and on. And then you reach capacity, and then they still go on and on. And then what happens is your brain gets traumatized by somebody else's X. And then they do a multiple X on top of that, and then they open a vault that they've never opened before, and they show you those X's too. And now you're into it for 92 minutes, and your capacity was maybe 7 minutes, but you're at 92, and your brain goes, that was not fun. And then you create what's called a limiting belief that says, I will never go into lane 3 again for the rest of my life. I'm happy to talk about hunting and fishing, hockey, firewood, if they're doing old growth fir, but if it's alder, probably not. And what you do is you limit your capacity, which actually mirrors most of our families growing up. It's not a judgment, it's just an observation. And this is interesting. This has nothing to do with which generation you are. Do you think the millennials are better at it than us? No, they're not. You know, the only ones that are actually really good at it? People that are in their last 6 months of life. That's when they come and they hold your hand and say, I just need to really tell you that I'm proud of you. Go, Dad, thanks. About 83 years late, but I appreciate that. And can you say the L word? And he's like, ugh. And your mother and I really love you. Bam! Said it, but he snuck out through a very high lane too by including good old mom, right? It's like he bounced into 3, just a touch, and then boom, out. The other ones that are really good at it are kids that haven't gone to school yet. So I have six grandkids. It's awesome. And all of a sudden there's these people that can unconditionally just jump on my lap. And I have these 2 grandsons that are like 3.5. When they're like 2.5 years old, they're wrestling with me on the couch. They're wrestling his grandpa's knee, and then they're wrestling grandpa's shoulder. And then one of them looks at the other one and goes, let's wrestle grandpa's nose. So before I had time, man, they just like, their claws are into my nose. Ah! And the next day I was presenting something like this, and I had a big old gash here, and I had some blood coming out of here. It was awesome. It was just like living there. Those kids, man, were before school, they have these innocent souls where they can just go into lane 3 and out again. You know what I mean? Unfiltered love, unfiltered crying. They can urinate anywhere. It's like grandpa's urinating, I'm urinating, we're all urinating. This is awesome. That's why Black Creek Acreage is so important for a healthy mental health, because you can urinate anywhere you want. And so it's no big deal. We have these situations that essentially traumatize our brain and says, that was not good. I got into this conversation, it got too deep, and now I don't know how to roll out of it, and therefore I will just not do that again in the future. The challenge for your whole day is, it's probably necessary, if you want to get world-class results in your business, to look at this and start charting this. The way you chart it is you make a list of 20 favorite people at work and at home. Then you ask yourself the question, what is my capacity with each one of these people? Do I have lane 1? Oh, there's one more road on this chart of ours. We just call it the logging road. And that's like, oh yeah, you worked at camp for a couple of years, you burned through a marriage or 2, you tried to communicate, you lost your Grady White, so you're not even fishing anymore. And so you're just on the logging roads. So you're going to work, but if you would actually scientifically look at it from a communication model, you're not in team. You're not in team. You're somewhere on a side road pretending to be side the team. We stand in lots of martial yards. All over the world, we stand in martial yards with our high-vis and our jeans and our plaid shirt, trying to fit in, but clearly not fitting in. And we watch. There's the people in team. Then there's the people that are way too aggressive. We just call them Big Bill. And they're like, yeah, well, shot 3 elk and 1 bill. Well, you think that's bad? It's like the big storytellers, right? And then there's the passive people that are just standing on the side sort of listening, but they usually have their hands behind their backs to tell. They're like, yeah, I don't feel comfortable talking in this group of team, but I like standing beside the team. It's a dead giveaway. By the way, all your micro expressions are so easy to read if you pay attention. You think you're hiding it because you're not saying it. Your body is communicating it 100%. It's fascinating. And then there's people here that with what we call just like in low-level rejection. So it's like Charlie Brown. So they've had a couple scuttles in life. They've filled up with a bunch of X's that tell them, yeah, you probably don't make, you're not cutting it. You're too old, you're too young, you're too this, you're too that. And for whatever reason, so they're tormented in their brain. The back of their brain is telling them lies. They're low-level lies, but they're lies nevertheless. And so they're in that torment state all the time, in and out and in and out. So part of their work life is here, but they got like 42% of their thought process actually back of the brain on the rejection side here. Then in the martial yard, there's always 3 trolls. They're like here. Yeah, they're probably going to contract this whole thing out. Yeah, we've been saying it for 25 years. wait a second, we are a contractor. We work for Interfor, that's right. We did get contracted out. Oh, we need a new troll thing to say. Can't come up with one. Why not? Because the back of your brain is not creative or innovative. It's not even funny. Oh well. Okay, let's get in the truck. New young workers love riding an hour and a half to work with one of those dudes. Super communicators. Wow. They're just nailing it. Like, you just set that kid up for success. Like, lucky you, you get to be the junior hook tender with that dude. Then, like what Al was talking about, we just call these people cave dwellers. So these exes become overwhelming, which is the stress. They're not managing the stress appropriately because they got the stimulus response, and they're not able to create the gap, which is what creates mental stress, mental health, because they're not in team anymore. So now they're up in this cave. And in every martial yard we've been around the world, we see cave dwellers. They're in the IT department. They're even in HR. And sometimes companies have actually there's a term for it. It's kind of like blacklisted, especially if it's a government organization. So they don't fire people, they just put them into a cubicle where they don't interfere with anybody else. And they can have their own little toxic blacklist. So sometimes you actually ask an operator that actually work in team, would you mind going onto a processor? Why? Because you don't ever have to talk to anybody. You don't have to have people skills. And you just go zoom, zoom, zoom all day, and your stress, which is toxic and negative, doesn't affect us. So then you take a troll and you convert them into a cave dweller. Now, the brain is like a muscle. Whatever you exercise gets stronger, whatever you don't exercise gets weaker. 3 years from now, after processing logs, does his brain become better at team or worse at team? Worse, because he's being trained 12 hours a day plus travel to be on his own watching logs buzz by. And then over here, we just have the classic bullies that we just call snowball throwers. How are we doing for time? $10 minutes, sweet. Just going to create the target. This is what we call the plan. It's a beautiful spot right here. This is the sweet spot you want to be in, and we call it quadrant 2. And this is 3, and that's 4. I don't know what that happened. Because now I just got into fight. Can you feel it? I said, you got 10 minutes left, and my blood pressure went, whoa! And then I got adrenaline, and I can't even draw or write or spell. It's like, it's awesome. So here's your systems, and here's your team. And there have been tremendous gains in safety and systems, guaranteed, either forced or voluntarily. But just about all of your systems now in 2017 are living in here. You could pour a bunch more money into digitization and all the rest, and you get single-digit gains, guaranteed. Like single, maybe 3% gain, maybe 4%. This is the untapped resource. If you can tap into something around the human factor, you're going to get a 20% bump on anything that you're doing. It's just the facts of life. Why? Because it's the hardest area to manage. It's the hardest area to measure, and it disrupts production. Because somehow you have to get people on track. So this is the target. So the plan, the simple way from a Switchback point of view to analyze whether your plan is going to be solid or not is it structurally within the rule box? Is it following the rules or regulations? Does it follow the systems? Are we on track there? And does it engage team? If it does, you get quadrant 2. This is just people that are all about the rules but lack people skills. These people are a barrel of monkeys, but they're not safe to be with. These people have an alcohol problem. And so, I'm being funny, but the truth is mental health issues drive you this way. They drive you out of 2. Mental health issues drive you out of team and scattering these 6 profiles. Mental health issues drive you out of team, and you lose the ability to manage the gap. The #1 issue in Australia is anxiety. From like 22-year-olds down to 55-year-olds. That country is just riddled with anxiety. just about every third person is seeing someone professionally for anxiety. What it means is they've lost their mental toughness to be able to open that gap between the stimulus and response. And finally, if you're in quadrant 2, you are actually developing the capacity to be in lane 3, not all the time, but the ability to come in and out. Okay, here's your task. You have 7 minutes, right? Sweet. Okay, so you've been thinking about it. Here's a bunch of diagrams. Scribble a diagram on the page. Pick any one you want as something you want to think about. So scribble it down, either the stop, the think, the talk, or the plan. So do it. You know where this is going. I'm going to have you commit, and then I'm going to have you talk to somebody about your idea. So if it's some scary thing that you never told anyone, please don't bring it up here. Because you're going to traumatize a poor logger, and he'll never go to quadrant 3 again, and they'll never hire Switchback in a million years. So be kind to us. So commit to one of these diagrams, either the 4 quadrants, the 3-lane capacity. Maybe you have a 14-year-old kid that you've lost capacity with. You go, oh, I can see this. If I look at my kids, I got a 14-year-old that's only at I'm barely doing the weather right now. Or maybe it's oh, I've got someone in my workplace that's a cave dweller. Or I've got someone that's dealing with X's. Or our company or situation is tracking out of 2. So you got that written down. I know some of you are like, you can't tell me what to do, because when teachers told me to do things, I said, up yours. And so that's really fun because I get to be the teacher right now. I used to be you, ha. So it's a little tough this way, isn't it? However, I did say you get to talk to somebody after this. So it's going to be awkward if I say, okay, now find someone to talk to you. You're like, I'm just going to be a troll. And I can outlast 5 minutes any day. No, instead this is a conference, not a workshop. Hey, this isn't a workshop. I signed up for a free conference. Actually, I signed up for lunch. Okay, so you got your commitment down? Okay, I know this is so freaky, but please introduce yourself to the person next door to you. Just say, hi, my name is Steve. And then you say, good. That's lane 1, right? My name is Steve, the weather. Then you got to get right down to business. So which diagram do you use? So I did the 4 quadrants. That's what this one's called, the 4 quadrants. Here it is, 4 quads. And then you go, oh, so what's that dot on the quadrants? Oh, that's my colleague at work. I think I need to reach out to them better because this and this. Or that's me, or that's, try to personalize it. If you make it personal, and then you ask the person, what's your plan? And they say, I think this is what my plan is. Okay, Marcus, go. Let's make this room rock. Let's hear some people talking. There they go. Introductions are happening. Here they come.
That was my first reaction, too.
Time, but you should talk about T-boning.
Oh, true enough. Yeah. True. Okay. How's our time?
About 5 minutes.
Oh, 5 minutes. Mountains of time.
See how many people said, and I introduced myself as Steve.
Right now. Cheeky.
But I'm the expert.
Right. You do really good at emceeing. That's probably why they give you the job every year, right?
We went into lane 2 to come right back.
Good for you. You're developing capacity. Ooh. I think my mic is good.
How many people are actually doing it?
Lots. Should I interrupt them already? Okay, thank you so much. So some of you had a really difficult situation because there was 3 people at your table and you said, oh my, How are we going to do this? Because there's 3 of us. Ah! Uh-oh, they're changing the world still. Got ourselves a revolution. A revolution. Okay, let's bring it to the front. Thank you so much.
We had so many chances to.
Here we go. If I could have your attention. Someone's like, you did it. So we stopped the flow of the day at 1 o'clock in the afternoon after all that roast beef. Imagine that. We stopped the flow of the day. We thought about something that's pretty strategic and something that's pretty important. And then you had the guts to potentially talk about it with somebody else. And after talking about it, surprise, surprise, you start coming up with some plans. And we just suggest measure your plan against this plan here. Make sure it's law-abiding. Make sure it keeps you out of the penalty box. Make sure it supports your current systems. Make sure it involves your team. I said goodbye to my father-in-law this just before the summer. Saskatchewan, he had a massive stroke eating ice cream, which is the way he wanted to go. We held his hand, he squeezed it for the first day, then he stopped squeezing it, and he passed away 4 days later. It was, believe it or not, it was awesome. It was awesome. Do you know why it was awesome? That man was a heavy-duty mechanic. He harvested just about every single X in his brain over his lifetime by forgiving people and loving people. He was expressive. He could lay on the floor in the living room and just visit. When first time I saw him, I'd never seen steak like that before, because we came from a food small family rather than a food big family. So that was like, this is awesome. Leftover steak, never seen that. And then I saw this man laying on the floor, and he goes, in his own living room, go, he's just like me. No wonder my wife fell in love with me, because she saw him in me, which was a man that was open to doing business in lane 3. Just open to doing business. Now, he didn't always get it right, but he was an awesome guy. Meanwhile, back on the farm, I have a brother-in-law that divorced my sister-in-law, like, you know what I mean, like my wife's sister, about 11 years ago. And through that process, he struggled with mental health issues. And he became passive, and then he became low-level rejection, and he loaded up a bunch of new exes with multiplying relationships, and he eventually lived in a cave. And you know, you think about it, we had this incredible like celebration of life for my father-in-law, but was my brother-in-law invited to the event? No. And then he broke up with his girlfriend, and then he decided to kill himself. So that's like 14 days later, he's gone. And you just look at this and go, ladies and gentlemen, this is serious business. It happens in our own little families. In our own little families. And of course, I can kick himself around the curb because there was a limiting belief that rolled around in my family, because we're kind of old school traditionalists, that says this: you divorced my sister, you got to pick sides. So I'm picking her because I'm going to support her and her 3 kids, and you're on your own, buddy. And then he was nasty through all like kinds of negotiating around stuff, so it just supported that theory. So there was lack of team even between me and him, even though I loved that guy. He was like my favorite brother-in-law, you know, while the cycle was rolling. So the limiting belief was that we didn't have the capacity to navigate team through that kind of stress. As a result, he ends up in the cave, he ends up here, and now there's a collateral damage that gets passed on to the next generation. We can catch this stuff. We can be better than this. And I'm super stoked to be able to stand on a stage like this and say that we're sort of working on this together. Hey, we've formed a partnership with Strategic because they are like hotshots in the IT world. They really are. You walk into their offices and they're like IT superstars. They kind of glows almost, their office. Like, gee, is it an iris scan or is it a sign in? Like, what's happening here? So they've built us e-learning platform. And now we're loading it up with sort of Netflix kind of content, which is going to be Switchback. And then they've built us a really cool survey app that's going to go on your phone. And you know what's going to happen then? Is you're going to be able to, anyone in your company is going to be able to access Switchback just as if they're watching Netflix. And then at any point as leaders in your company, if you sort of sign up to our world and join our community, is you'll be able to ask really important questions. How are you today? And this will show up on their screen. They just touch the screen twice, done. And it's real live data. And we're thinking it's going to change lives. It's going to help build team. And by the way, we say people can change with neuroplasticity. We also say the power of success is in team. I just want to let you know, Stephen Falk and Black Creek doesn't have the capacity to do what we need to do without partnering with Strategic. And so if that's the way it rolls, ladies and gentlemen, you really have to work with each other in team to push this culture forward. Thank you very much. Have a great afternoon.